Hello again, everyone. Thank you for coming back so late in the day. Next, we've got our next talk from Michelle, who said she may or may not break out into interpretive dance. So we'll see how that goes in the next talk.
Who knows?
Please welcome Michelle.
So thank you all for coming, and thank you PyCon for hosting an IoT track. It's pretty cool. So as said, I'm Michelle. I'm talking about the Internet of Human Connectedness. Warning up front, this is not about Python. I know I'm at PyCon. It's not about Python, so if you require your PyCon talks to be about Python, you can leave. It's okay. There's like a Harry Potter theme to the GIFs used in this presentation, so that might make you stay. But if you hate Harry Potter, you should also leave probably too. I'm sorry. Okay, so cool. Now that's out of the way, and no one left, so that's nice. Thank you. So who am I? My name is Michelle. I am a career changer. I studied business and law at uni. I'm a qualified solicitor and chartered accountant. I know I look very young, but I worked at a Big Four accounting firm for 5-6 years in risk management, and well, I've been around the block. And I decided at some point that I didn't like that block. So I took a sabbatical and I learned how to code. I'm now a junior dev and I teach kids and adults how to code, and I'm a dancer. These facts are relevant to my talk.
We'll do that.
Maybe later. So, Internet of Things. I already told you that my talk's not about Python, and I'm standing here in the IoT track, so fingers crossed this is about the Internet of Things, because someone's getting in trouble otherwise. I'm sorry. So 8 months ago, I didn't really know what the Internet of Things were. I knew about LG's smart fridge. I knew I could put sensors around my apartment and get readings onto my smartphone. I have a Fitbit, so I know that collects my data, sleeping patterns, movements, blah, blah, blah. I was a consumer of the Internet of Things. And as a consumer, I guess it's pretty cool. Like, you can connect things to things, pretty cool. My fan, my toothbrush, my plant, they can all be things. That's cool. But what I knew about IoT was from a consumer perspective. And I don't know, like, it kind of scared me. I saw Mr. Robot, and that scared me. But drilling down into it, the thing that I didn't quite like about the Internet of Things was that somebody else was in control, or could potentially take control, as was the case of the smart home in Mr. Robot, or someone else was collecting my data, a Fitbit. Also, IoT seemed to be the plaything of people with money, the people who could afford the gadgets. So if I had any feelings towards IoT, it would have been maybe neutral at best. I then had the good fortune of hearing the amazing Charlie Gerard speak about IoT. She first learned on a Sphero, and later she's currently doing stuff with mine sensors and drones. It is very, very cool. So anyways, she started with IoT as a means of just learning something new. She wanted to understand how this thing worked, so she just started doing it. And on that basis, I wanted in. But before I started, I really drilled down into what I wanted to get out of the project, what I wanted to achieve. And not what did I want my project to achieve, like what the thing's going to do, but what I wanted to get out of it. And what I wanted to get out of it was I wanted to learn about hardware, specifically how hardware interacted with software. This is something I came back to again and again throughout the project when I was losing my mind. So the purpose was never to actually build something, especially not something to show anyone. The purpose was to learn. This is important. So I went down the black hole, rabbit hole of the internet and tried to figure out what to do first. There's a lot of things you can buy online. There are kits available. I kind of wanted to do an Arduino remote control car at first, which I'm pretty sure people in this room have tried. You can buy kits, resources are available online, it's all there for you to do. But something didn't seem right about that for me. One, there are so many kits available. How did I know which one to buy? Was something cheap because it was cheap or because someone was making less profit than another company? Like, who knows? I have a lot of thoughts. And similarly to following a recipe to bake a cake, I could have bought the ingredients, followed the recipe, and voila, I got a cake at the end. But I didn't want a cake. I wanted to learn how the eggs interacted with the flour, or if there was a difference between self-raising flour and plain flour added with baking powder. I wanted to understand how things worked behind the scenes. And to do that, I couldn't use a kit. I needed to break things on my own. And plus, like, what am I going to do with a remote control car? I have a small apartment. It takes up too much space. So I went back into the black hole of the internet, and I found this. This is pretty. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a dancer. I do ballet. So this is cool for me because it combines tech and ballet. But, like, what is it? It is an Arduino Lilypad, so a wearable version of an Arduino, connected to an accelerometer on the top of the foot, which measures X, Y, Z positions, velocity. It's force-sensitive resistors on the toe, the point, the ball of the foot, and the heel. And there is Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity. So obviously, I wanted to do this. And I'm fortunate enough to have friends who have experience with hardware. So in addition to finding the diagram on the previous screen, I sought input from friends and on Slack channels as to what to do. And I considered buying all the things on the previous slide and banging it all together. That's how things work. But I had some questions. Was ripping off someone's project, and that was a commercial project, was that an okay thing to do? I kind of concluded it was because I was obviously just learning, and I'm not going to commercialize it. But I wanted my project to be my own, so just copying someone else's thing, and like I knew what went into it because I could see the diagram. So was that really going to help me achieve my purpose? And my friend also kept mentioning the Arduino Balloon Beetle, which is the world's smallest Arduino. And you're saying that I should use that instead of the Lilypad because, well, it's smaller. It's also cheaper. It's not subject to the pink tax. And it is, well, new and fancy. And I also had kind of some issues with using the Lilypad because it was, in my opinion, more expensive than the Balloon. And if you haven't heard of it, it is an Arduino targeted at girls. And like, I'm all for inclusion and encouraging people to venture into hardware. That's why I'm here today. But I didn't need a girly gateway drug into Arduinos. I could handle the real thing, the cheaper version of the real thing. And anyways, that particular Arduino isn't even available anymore. So kind of get off my high horse. So this is what I bought. It's the Arduino Balloon Beetle, so like a Lilypad, but smaller, gender neutral. Force-sensitive resistors, that's the thing in the plastic. An accelerometer, which is the thing below the colored wires. A battery charger, and some conductive thread. So the idea was to sew them all together onto a ballet slipper or an inner sole with conductive thread. Thank you for not laughing at my picture. There are some things missing. So I didn't know I needed to prototype onto a breadboard. There's no wires, and there's no battery. There's a battery charger, but no battery. Didn't realize that's what I needed. So that's skipping ahead. When I first started, I only had those materials. And I had to sit there and figure out what to do. As I said, I knew nothing. So figuring out what to do literally meant staring at the pieces, trying to figure out what they did. In the case of the Beetle, the questions for me were along the lines of, what is analog versus digital? How does the Beetle talk to my laptop? Where do I see the output? So I discovered that the Arduino has its own IDE and uses serial monitor. But I found out today that I could actually maybe do this in VS Code. But anyways, And then with the force-sensitive resistors, what did they do and how did they work? So they detect physical force, pressure, weight, and they work by having two layers separated by a sensor, an active layer and a semiconductive layer. So the harder you press them together, the more, I guess, active area touching the conductive area, and the resistance goes down. So I kind of knew what the things did individually. This is good. Now I just had to figure out how they work together. So I found some useful resources online, like this circuit diagram. It's for a different Arduino, but it's kind of useful. How does that work, though? So what I can now tell you is that conductive wires, it's a bit of a spoiler, conductive wires connect the Arduino to the force-sensitive resistor, which is that black and green thing. And there is a wire that also goes to ground. There's like a jelly bean shaped thing that's colored, connected to the black wire. That is a resistor as well. So what happens is if a current goes through the red wire, so from 5 volts through the force-sensitive resistor, the current is given a choice. It can either go to ground or it can go to an analog pin. So here it's AO. If you press the force-sensitive resistor, the current will favor the blue path. If you don't press it, it will take the path of least resistance, which is to ground. So that's pretty good. I had an idea of what my pieces did. I had a diagram I could follow. I just needed to like smush it together. It's going to go well, right? That's the story. The problem was well, the diagrams are only useful to an extent. What I just explained to you was what I now understand. When I first looked at the diagram, I saw different colored wires, didn't even see the jelly bean colored thing, and also I was using conductive thread. And conductive thread is just like normal thread. You use a needle and you sew it. And the force-sensitive resistor is a piece of plastic. Like I sat there trying to figure out how I could sew my conductive thread through my force-sensitive resistor without breaking it. So I was very confused. I looked at this for quite a long time, an embarrassing amount of time. I tried to Google my way to a solution, like all good devs. I had a problem though, because I probably wasn't asking the right questions, but also when I was finding answers, I didn't actually know what I was reading. I was trying to extrapolate information from other projects, other resources, and apply them to my own, but in the process, I was disregarding things that was actually relevant to me. So I asked for help. I told my friend what I was trying to do, and he immediately told me that I needed wires and a breadboard. Oh, and a resistor. I replied, I'm using a ballet slipper and conductive thread. And also, what's a breadboard? He explained to me that I needed to prototype my circuits onto a breadboard to actually check that what I was trying to do worked. And then once that was finalized, I could then put it onto a slipper, solder it, sew it, whatever. The point was that I could trial it out in a very easy way and then hardwire it later on. I didn't know these things. That kind of annoyed me, but at the same time, it did make me feel better about myself because I realized that with the stuff available online, there's a lot of assumed knowledge, which, well, I didn't have. That also got me thinking, how do people who learn on their own know things? Maybe I should have done a kit. So anyways, after I built my first circuit with the force-sensitive resistor, I could do this. So it doesn't look like much. I can hear your applause. What's happening here is I'm literally just squeezing the force-sensitive resistor and output as to the size of the force. A floating point between 0 and 1 is being sent to my Arduino IDE. So it doesn't like much, but this is the first thing I did, and it was very exciting. I think I told everyone I knew, and they thought I lost my mind. But that's okay. It's only the beginning. So I was very excited, and then I repeated the process again and again. So I tried to figure out what I had to do next, break it down, try to actually do it, eventually ask for help, either figured it out on my own or got someone else to do it, and moved on to the next thing. It was all very exciting stuff. So after I got the force-sensitive resistor working, I then had to figure out how to get the information from the Arduino IDE through to the browser, because I knew I wanted to visualize it in the browser with probably P5. So that process was repeated for everything on this slide. There's a lot of words. Remembering that I had zero experience with hardware and I'm only a junior dev, didn't really know much about these things. So theoretically, this could have been very overwhelming. There was so much I didn't know, and there was a huge risk of detail overload, or maybe me just like throwing in the towel. But fortunately, I didn't know anything. I didn't know that all this was involved. What I did know, though, was what I wanted to achieve. I wanted to get my data from my Arduino IDE through to my browser. I didn't know there were so many hoops to jump through to get there. So what I ended up doing was using serial port to send the information through to a Node.js server, and then the information was forwarded on to the browser with WebSockets, which is pretty cool. And the data is then visualized in the browser using P5 JavaScript library, which is based in the processing framework for creative coding. So I'll show you that on the next slide. But I by no means knew that in advance. I only did as much as I needed to do to keep going to achieve what I wanted to achieve. In the case of the accelerometer, just staring at it, I noticed there wasn't an analog or a digital port. There was SDA and SCL. So of necessity, I learned about I2C communication protocol, so that it sends and receives the data, serial clock and serial data sequentially. So batches of information can be sent as opposed to single pieces of information, as is the case with the force-sensitive resistor. So after getting through all that, I could do this. So what's happening here is I am squeezing the force-sensitive resistor, which is triggering draw. And then the X and Y position of the dots on the screen is driven by the XY position of my accelerometer. And the size of the circle is driven by the Z position of my accelerometer. So that's pretty cool, right? I wanted to learn, I was learning, something happened. Yay. But there was a problem with that. I quickly realized this was really random. Like, yes, there was a methodology behind my problem-solving process, like how I was approaching the problems and the order in which I was solving them. But in terms of actual learning, or the actual solving part, it would take a really long time for me to do really, in hindsight, basic things. And I'd get so excited when things were working that I would try and ride this imaginary momentum and then skip forward to the next thing without really taking time to understand why things worked the way they did, or how the person who helped me knew how to do the thing that they taught me how to do. I wasn't really filling in the blanks. So, yeah, I got an outcome. But the point of the project, as I mentioned earlier, was never to get something that worked. It was to learn. And sure, I was learning how to deal with not knowing things and asking questions, how to figure things out. But the real purpose of the project was to learn about hardware, specifically how it worked. So I needed to force myself somehow to consolidate how all the things I was learning. I was writing notes along the way, but they were by no means substantial or technical. One of the reasons I found it so hard was because the resources I found online, they weren't pegged at my level. There was all this assumed knowledge that I didn't have. So that got me thinking, there must be other people like me. So I wrote notes, Medium articles, for the nominal me, the notes that I wish I had when I first started. And also, in hindsight, I realized I was writing it for future me because there's been periods of time where I've put this down and picked it back up and had no idea what I was doing. So it's a very future past type thing going on. I recommend you all do it. Also kind of the point of writing notes in code, comments in code. So I wrote these Medium articles to document the process, what I learned along the way. It forced me to pause and reflect on what I was learning, to delve into the technicals and implement the Richard Feynman technique, if you will. What I was inadvertently doing was learning in public. I was documenting the process of learning while in it. These are by no means beautiful works of prose written in hindsight. They're full of the excitement and exhaustion of learning something new. What I'm telling the universe is this is what I'm trying to do, and the universe has responded. People have offered their assistance to me. They've even offered their resources. And some people just want to chat. It's a cool thing to talk about. They capture the feeling of learning something new, and also the technical part as well. I like to think that in 5 years' time, it will be like looking back at an old diary, seeing how far I've grown and how much I've grown and how far I've come. And hopefully I'll help other people in the process. There's also some really cool positive side effects of having written these articles, in that they're tangible things I can share with people. They're the answer to the question asked in hushed tones around my old office of what happened to Michelle. The answer to the question isn't, she quit her job, she dyed her hair pink, I think she lost her mind. It's, she's doing some cool shit with hardware and she seems very happy. I think too much and I feel very uncomfortable around people. Yet somehow this project has given me, well, made me more vulnerable to other people and exposed pretty much, I don't know anything. And I'm standing here right now telling you I don't know anything, but weirdly confident at the same time. Also in a small way, I like to think I'm giving back, even just a little bit. And it's something cool and random to talk about, so much so that I'm here now doing that. So why is anything I've said relevant today? Rhetorical question. It's because it has made me a better person. And I'm not telling you all to go out and attach sensors to shoes. What I'm suggesting you all do is try something new, something you'll probably fail at. It'll probably make you better at your jobs because you'll develop an empathy for that beginner's mindset. You learn some humility. It made me better at ballet because I now listen more intently to my teacher's super basic instructions to newbies. I'll take the time to explain to them how to do things, and it has improved my technique as a result. To the more experienced people in the room, I'm sure you have juniors and they're just like me. They just want to learn. And maybe they're fortunate enough to have people around them that will explain things to them in a way that they understand. I know I had that for this project. I used to be a manager. I know I look very young, but I used to be a manager and I used to be responsible for reviewing people's work and for training other people. And I remember I used to look around and I could see that reviewing and training people was often an exercise in ego stroking rather than actually wanting someone else to grow. It was about showing how great you were, how much you knew, how big the differential between their knowledge and your knowledge was. Like, that's pretty shit. And it's not about you. It's about them. It's about growing them. And anyways, your junior probably walks around thinking that everyone is better than them anyways. They don't need to be reminded of that every time they ask you a question. So what they need from you is for you to explain things to them in a way that they understand. They need you to be patient and understanding. Because by asserting how great you are, what they're hearing is that they're not good enough. They're not smart enough to understand. They're not going to blame you, they're going to blame themselves. And confidence is such a fragile thing. Don't make it harder than it already is. So take a class, learn something new. And if you have a good teacher, or even better, if you have a really bad one, you'll learn the importance of this. With whatever you do, I would recommend participating in the community. Surround yourself by people doing the thing you want to do. Be the dumbest person in the room. It's okay. I'm proof of that. Push yourself. Please go out and do some cool stuff with IoT or anything really. My project obviously isn't finished yet. I have some throttling issues which is causing the browser to crash. And I still need to build it onto the shoe. But I'm already looking at how I can stretch it further. I want to hand make my own force-sensitive resistors. I want to learn about machine learning, so I want to see if I can use machine learning to assess my technique. I'm also interested in creative coding, so I want to see where I can take it from a creative coding perspective, learn some new visualization libraries, that kind of thing. One thing I didn't specifically mention was that hardware is hard. Like, I'm a web developer. I'm not used to having to deal with physical bugs. And with hardware and software interaction, there is so much more scope for things to screw up. Is something not working because the library's out of date? There's something wrong with my code? Or did I do something stupid and short circuit my board? Like, it's hard to figure it all out. And then for me, like, once I have my prototype finalized, I need to transpose it onto the physical shoe. And then once I do that, I have to be brave and put my foot in the shoe and hope I don't electrocute myself. This is a concern of mine. The project makes computing physical, embodied projects. And that's really cool, but physical objects are fragile. And as a web developer, that's something I'm still getting my head around. Don't break the thing, otherwise you need to wait 2 weeks for it to come in the mail. So the Internet of Things, or coding in general, it doesn't have to be useful. It can be completely pointless, and to me, that's the point. I started playing with this not really knowing where it would take me. This, to me, this passion project is the equivalent of wandering around a foreign city without a map, letting the journey take me as it will, and seeing at the end of the day where I end up. Anyone who's done this will know it is amazing fun. You might not get very far, but you would have had a very good time and maybe learned something about yourself in the process. And this is meant to be fun, right? It's the whir inside your head because you can't stop thinking about something. And suddenly, these difficult concepts you're trying to learn don't seem so hard because the desire to learn is based in passion, not fear or stress. You're not doing it for work, you're doing it for fun. It pulls you in different directions and takes on a momentum of its own. I love the feeling of working on this project, and I hope that you will also find that. And who knows, one day you might be talking about your project to a room full of people and be able to add conference speaker to the thing your passion project helped you achieve.
Thank you very much, Michelle. It's certainly very inspiring, I think. I'm sure other people agree. Do we have any other questions?
Oh.
Oh, Michelle, that was great. So where did you end up putting the battery in the shoe?
I ordered the battery last night. I'm kind of glad I did now because there's an answer to the question at least. Yeah.
Hey, thanks. Really enjoyed your talk. It was awesome.
Thank you.
I was wondering what thoughts you were having about building your own force-sensitive resistors.
Planning on crossing that bridge when I come to it. I had a friend who noticed that about the original project and said that would be a cool thing to do. And I'm like, I could totally do that. I don't really know my limits, so it seems like something I could totally do.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm reading between the lines a bit, and it sounds like you reached out for help.
Oh, yeah.
I'm assuming that you reached out for help online and in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just sort of curious what different responses you got from that, and like which was the most helpful.
In-person help, because then someone could physically look at my potentially short-circuited circuits and help me. I found it at first really hard to describe like what the problem was because I didn't know what I was looking at. But then often it's kind of like the rubber duck principle. If you try and explain a problem, like I was trying to like type out an explanation as to what problem I was having online, and by doing that part, it enabled me to at least realize what my problem was and solve it for myself. Or with asking for help in person, I could at least articulate the question better. a lot of people online were helpful in trying to like give me assistance, but at the very beginning, it was like, I don't know, like, I don't know what my problem is. So like anything kind of. So yes, I think sometimes you do need a physical person there looking at what you're doing, and it's like, what you're thinking about, Michelle, like that's, no, just like focus on this, and then you can do that. Like, and also like I think talking to someone is easier.
So I think that's all we have time for now. So thank you very much, Michelle.